Salutations, respected viewers. This is Stuart from Ireland, and behind me is a statue of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, most commonly known as Mahatma, as in great souled. So this is a statue that was erected here in London just a few years ago. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, when he visited about 3 years ago, he came here and he scattered petals at the feet of this statue. So who is the man on the plinth? Well, he was born in 1879 in Gujarat, which is one of the western states of India. India was then under the British Raj. There were many princely states, over 600, and then there was British India as such, which was directly ruled by the government of British India. So Gandhi's father was a prime minister of one of these princely states, as in there was a hereditary ruler who appointed someone to help him with the administration. These princely states, they were internally self-governing, but they relied on the United Kingdom for foreign affairs. They wouldn't do anything that would really hack off the British authorities. They often had their own armies, and they would sometimes send their armies to help the Indian army and the British army on campaigns. So anyway, Gandhi was a Hindu. He was from one of the middle castes. He was not a Brahmin, he was not a Dalit, or Shustra, so on. And then he decided to study law. So he came here to London and he read law at the Middle Temple. He did not go to university. Barristers were not required to attend university until the 1960s. Although by the 20th century it was highly unusual to be a barrister without a degree. And having been called to the bar, he then actually moved to South Africa initially, where there was a significant Indian community. And the South African government had passed racially discriminatory laws against the Indian minority there. The majority of people of South Africa, then as now, were black. What else? There's the famous story of Gandhi on the train. So he purchased a first-class ticket. He was an affluent barrister. However, there was a white passenger who took the gravest possible exception to sharing a carriage with a man of Indian blood, and who demanded that the ticket inspector remove Gandhi. Gandhi said, "I'm legally here, I have my ticket, I refuse to go." And it turned out that Gandhi was turfed out in the station, far away from his destination. And that really crystallized what he felt was injustice in this imperial system. What people don't like to point out now is Gandhi actually did believe in racial discrimination, supported it, except he wanted the Indians to be the right side of the racial divide, to be on the same sides of the whites, and to discriminate against the black majority. But that's written out of the script now because it doesn't reflect very well on him. So it wasn't just some whites who had anti-black prejudice. Anyhow, he still believed that the empire was a force for good, and he said that Indians ought to be loyal to it, just work for reform within the system. When the Second South African War broke out in 1899, he was a stretcher bearer, an ambulance driver, and he encouraged other Indians to do likewise. When it came to the First World War, he urged his compatriots to volunteer for the Indian Army. He said it was fighting in defense of minor nationalities around the world. It's hard to describe a country so populous as India as being a minor nationality. Nevertheless, however, he thought that the British would show some gratitude to Indians after the Great War for Civilization, as the First World War was known, and that they would allow very substantial reforms. And the British Raj was under considerable pressure in the First World War, gave non-committal answers to these demands for reforms. Gandhi had returned to India by that stage. He was a member of the Indian National Congress, an organisation founded with the blessing of the British Raj in 1885, for the purpose of providing a critical analysis of the Raj and representing Indian public opinion to the British authorities. But anyway, after the First World War, it all went pear-shaped. November 1918 was the armistice. It was far from clear the war was actually over. Negotiations were ongoing in Paris, and it wasn't certain that Germany or the other Central Powers would accept this. The war could have restarted. Moreover, there had been the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and there was communist agitation in India. So extraordinary security legislation was passed in India, and this led to great protests, and eventually the Jallianwala Bagh massacre of April 1919, where at least 379 unarmed people were shot dead. Alright, so can't go through his entire career, but he was the leader of the Congress Party for a while. By the 30s, it was his disciple, Jawaharlal Nehru, who was leading it. So although Gandhi was an observant Hindu, he found great respect in other faiths, and he read from the Quran, the Bible, and so forth. And he tried to promote a fraternity between people of different faiths and races. And he also recognized that many of his co-religionists mistreated the untouchable castes abominably. So by the 40s, largely a spiritual figure and not a overtly political one. He'd led his famous Salt March in the 30s against the salt tax, going all the way to the sea with hundreds of followers and evaporating some water to get salt, which was illegal. But the viceroy at the time, Lord Halifax, made sure that there was no police officer within a mile of him. He was not going to arrest Gandhi. Gandhi in the 20s has been pursuing a policy of non-cooperation, civil disobedience. His passive resistance campaign got him arrested quite a lot. He was fined, but he refused to pay the fines. He wanted to go to prison, provoke the authorities. He was in and out of prison a lot in the 20s and 30s. Often he would declare a fast unto death, which would never end in the death. Well, not his, but the civil unrest this provoked often did lead to the deaths of other people. So he flip-flopped on pacifism quite a lot. And when it came to the Second World War, he said, well, we're not going to support the British because they're not giving us immediate independence, and talking about pacifism. Nehru and the Congress Party, they offered to the British immediate declaration of war on Germany so long as there was immediate independence for India. But the British authorities didn't go for that one because it's possible that Nehru wouldn't uphold his end of the bargain, or they might do almost no fighting. They could declare war, then make peace, blah, blah, blah. So what else about Gandhi? Well, he was married, he had some children, and his grandson still keeps the flame alive for him today. But then when the Japanese invaded India, he said, well, maybe we'll have to train with lathis and so on to fight them off, as though a sophisticated military power could be defeated with sticks. So he was very inconsistent about pacifism. He was against modern medicine, saying it was effeminate and it weakened men, and that injections were violent. He was a crank in many respects. So one should not be purblind to his shortcomings. So finally independence came in August 1947. The 15th of August for India. Pakistan had been created the day before, and he was adamantine in his opposition to partition. But it having happened, he said that they ought to accept it, and he planned to go on a goodwill visit to Pakistan just after its foundation. Remember, there was the most horrific scale of bloodshed in August 1947 accompanying partition. Trainloads of refugees were put to the sword by both sides. So in January 1948, he was preparing to visit the new Pakistan. However, in a house in New Delhi, as he was walking to a prayer session, he was approached by Narayan Apte and Nathuram Godse, who shot him dead. His last words were, "Hey Ram," as in, "Oh God." He was cremated the next day. In a museum in New Delhi, you can see the gun that shot him and like other artifacts. So that is Gandhi, someone who's revered by many people around the world, peace activists and those who campaign for racial equality. So he was certainly a world historical figure, but in many ways startlingly naive, writing a letter of protest to Hitler about the Holocaust as though that was going to do any good, saying that the United Kingdom should stop fighting in the middle of the Second World War, and really having no regard to what the repercussions of that would be. So here he is, Gandhi. We should not overlook his misjudgments, but certainly he was a force for good in opposing racial and religious prejudice.